It's a point that probably many of you don't really know all that much about and maybe don't care about yet, but it will drastically affect the future of the human race and the overall condition of life on Earth. The powers that be can get rid of human motherhood. They're going to get rid of the sacred feminine, the idea of the sacred mother, the divine mother. This is something that's been passed down from culture to culture. It is something that has been a fundamental building block of a healthy, happy, and successful human life. In the mammalian model, a mother's love is essential to any healthy species. You see this with the most vicious of predators, whether it be a lion or a tiger mother. They still lavish love on their offspring. And the human being's ability to love is what really separates us from the other species.
A mother's love is essential for a healthy species, and I think Paul Romano absolutely nails it there. So welcome to video 5, and if this is the first time you're watching, go back to video 1, 2, 3, and 4. Many people ask me, how do I know what's truthful and factual in these accounts and stories? And barristers have said, there are always two sides of the story. He said, she said in a court battle. But there's a third party, the child. And the child is represented, usually in court, by an independent child lawyer. Now, when I did my survey in 2018, the main complaint of corruption was the independent child lawyer. Many of these lawyers had not even met the child that they were representing in court, had not even found out what their views were, and were presenting in court something that the child did not want. Now that's clear in the documentation. So in my discovery of all this, I have, in essence, excluded the parents, and I focused on the child. What is the child saying? Because if someone has perpetrated sexual abuse, they will accuse the other person of lying, psychosis, delusions, whatever. So one has to focus on what did the children say? How did the children present? So I've been sent many recordings, videos, many written documents, and I've focused on what the kids have to say. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, I'm a film director, and several decades ago, I directed a TV series about heroic stories of children and also some kids' movies. So I think I'm pretty familiar with children having to act out, and a child cannot sustain a constant performance year in and year out with different people, providing a consistent and identical story. So this is not acting, it is real. I believe it's quite easy to pick up when a child is coached. But in these cases, these children have spoken out innocently, sometimes very often. Their injuries are visible and their trauma is absolutely identifiable. So if I was to present a hypothetical case to you, it would be something similar to a child is disclosed to 5 to 8 mandatory reporters about serious abuse, that her father put his doodle in her mouth, pulled down my pants, I started to bleed in my bum when I went to the toilet, he tied me up, put me in a cage. There are many, many examples of these abuses, and they're written or spoken very innocently, not knowing what is actually happening. They have no understanding of what's really being done to them. I've seen videos of kids screaming not to be sent back, desperately phoning the police, pleading with social workers, with officers of the court, and then running away, desperately running away, saying at all costs they are not going to go back. And you can be sure that once this child is disclosed to a teacher, to a psychologist, to a doctor, and then no one's listening, no one is acting protectively, you can be sure that child will never speak to a teacher again. So the child has to withdraw and dissociate to survive. I've heard many accounts of children being threatened with their lives, threatened with their mothers' lives, if you speak out, I'm going to kill your mum, that kind of stuff. So once that child realizes the system is not going to assist, is not going to protect, that child has to shut down and survive. You have to wonder what the hell is going on, because all across the world, the Western world, the courts and the child protection departments are acting in unison. They're doing all the same thing. They're severing the bonds of family and separating children and boosting this out-of-home care industry. And there's some very many good advocates working exceptionally hard against the odds to try to rescue these children for protective parents. I think the case of this mum running away with 2 kids explains everything about child protection. There was this mum that had 2 kids, and 13 people had written 40 reports explaining that these 2 kids had been desperately abused. Professor Frida Briggs, who was the preeminent expert on child sexual abuse in Australia, said this is one of the worst cases she'd ever come across. And she asked Dr. Pridgeon to get involved. Professor Briggs did everything to try to persuade the courts that these kids needed the care of their mum, but the court sent them back to the abusive father. Out of desperation, after some time, the mum went to the school and the kids wanted to run away with her, and they went on the run. Now, theoretically, she had every right to go and rescue those kids. The Family Law Act provides provision for that, 70 NAE, where one can contravene an order if you believe someone is in grave danger. She believed they were in grave danger, and she went on the run for 4 years before she was caught and then arrested. But I'm going to read from Hannes Wessels' article, and I've put a link on the bottom for that, because I think that explains what is going on in this case. And the article is entitled Something Rotten Down Under. And this is about the Australian Federal Police's Operation Noetic. And he explains that some 7 years ago, Russell was approached by Professor Frida Briggs, and with Patrick O'Day responded immediately to Frida's call, and they formed the Australian Anti-Pedophile Party with the sole aim of exposing the malfeasance of the family court under parliamentary privilege. In April 2018, the mother was arrested, jailed, and the children were returned to their father. Russell then intervened and began writing letters to the state ministers of child safety, the police, as well as the Federal Attorney General. So Russell wrote 5 letters to the minister, pleading with the minister to intervene. Dear Minister, this is the 4th letter I've written to you about the most urgent matter of child welfare and safety. My emails are now being blocked from reaching you. The facts of the treatment of the children are so appalling that if it became public, it would shock and shame this country. You may believe you can hide behind official secrecy, but the truth always comes out. Instead of them helping the children, they then arrested all the helpers, the protectors. The response from the minister came in the form of the Australian Federal Police when Russell and Patrick were arrested by 28 police officers in a massively publicised arrest. The police then supplied misleading information to an unquestioning media. It was an orchestrated event alleging that these men were, and especially Russell, was the kingpin of a national and international child kidnapping ring involving 1 to 200 children. They alleged he financed the child kidnapping with his own money, that he was paid to kidnap, steal, abduct, and traffic children, that he bought a yacht with the intent of trafficking children to foreign countries. Now, this is quite astonishing. And again, you put up the mirror, you will see that they are the ones not protecting the children. So the protectors are then vilified into being child stealers. It's absolutely outrageous.
We have a right to protect our children. If we didn't protect these children, we would be breaking the law. Yet we're being charged with crimes. The people who abuse these children are not being charged. They're being protected. They're being protected by the AFP. This denial is absolutely blatant, it's absolutely brazen, and it's quite wrong. The child protectors, the child protectors, are being prosecuted by the very people who failed to protect these children in the first place. It is a crime to hide a crime. The AFP know the full facts of these children's abuse. They have access to the police databases. They have taken our computers, they've taken all our documentation, and that documentation is replete with descriptions and evidence of the children's abuse. Yet they do nothing. Yet they continue to lie about the children's abuse. They say the abuse did not occur. It occurred. If we choose to disbelieve the children, then we create the perfect crime. Our Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, promised the children of Australia that they would be believed and they would be protected, and that's what we did. We believed these children. We believed them and we protected them. This is a very dark moment in the history of the Australian Federal Police. Their behaviour is appalling.
I think the courts and the Australian Federal Police and the government have been caught out because they seized all their computers, they've taken it out of the secrecy of the family court, and now they have to present it in a proper court, all the evidence. All the evidence that these two men and others are child stealers. They also have to present the exculpatory evidence. They have to present all the evidence truthfully, and they can't do that because when they do that, all this abuse that was maliciously ignored by authorities and specifically by police, cover-ups, will be exposed. So what are they doing? They put ankle bracelets on them and they've been delaying and delaying, and they have swamped the court with so much paperwork that it will be impossible to digest. It's a simple case. And that's why I say go back to the beginning. Exclude all the adults. Exclude them all. What did the children disclose? What injuries were demonstrated? What injuries were confirmed? This is what it's all about. No one, as I said, no one gives a shit about the children. The court is an industry in itself. It's a money-making industry in itself. But what's not happening in court is that the children are not being listened to and not being heard. And the Prime Minister has promised us that children will be listened to and children will be believed. No, it's not happening. Sir, it's not happening. No one is listening to these children. And there's no one to go for help. It appears from all these cases, now I'm talking about these extreme cases, where it's plain and obvious that child sexual abuse occurred, no one is prepared to open the door and say, let me investigate. This all circles back to the child. The child spoke out again, maybe went to a teacher. And when that child realizes that the system is not protecting him or her, that actually they may have been pulled away from their protective parent, and now their contact with their protective parent is now under supervision, and deliberately so that the protective parent and the child cannot communicate about the abuse anymore. And so the child realizes that he or she is no longer protected. They might have to dissociate from the trauma that they were experiencing. But you'll be sure that they will most likely not speak out again. They won't go to a teacher again. They went last time, nothing happened. I noticed that many of these children declared that they were threatened. It's a common feature in all these cases where the abuser says, if you speak out, I'm going to kill you, I'm going to kill your mum, or whatever. So you can imagine a child being pulled away from its protective parent and now is essentially alone in the world. They have to pretend that they're okay. They will try seek out any little joy, because that's what kids do. They will seek out joy in their lives. Where does that leave us? It leaves me angry. I urge anyone here to be writing to their ministers, to be writing to the Prime Minister that this needs to be corrected, that children need to be heard. If a few cases were prosecuted properly, people were jailed for doing the wrong thing, social workers were prosecuted for lying, police were demoted for concealing evidence, or whatever the case may be, the system would start to change. But it seems like, as I said before, the system seems to be protected. And this is what we see on the surface layer. But I'm encouraged to believe that we are in a changing world, and it's no longer a conspiracy. You can't deny it anymore. The public can't put a lid on this anymore. The Epstein can of worms is opening, and it will go very much deeper than the mainstream media is so far presenting. So I believe if we speak about this, that change will come, and that a new era in Australia has to pass, because we cannot accept this state of ignoring the future of society. These children are going to grow up, and for a healthy species, we need to nurture that love between parent and child.
Mr. Speaker, today as a nation, we confront our failure to listen, to believe and to provide justice. And again today we say sorry. To the children we failed, sorry. To the parents whose trust was betrayed and who have struggled to pick up the pieces, sorry. To the whistleblowers who we did not listen to, sorry. To the spouses, partners, wives, husbands, children who have dealt with the consequences of the abuse, cover-ups and obstruction, sorry. To generations past and present, sorry. Sorry. Sorry.